Awesome. Let's talk a few minutes about the Pretenders, especially this Pretenders 2. Personally, I think it's just as great as the first album, and well, it's necessary. If you have the first Pretenders album, you need this album, Pretenders 2. Great album, no matter what the critics said then or now. Let's talk a few minutes about why this means a lot to me and why it's just a good album, great album, no matter what. Anyway, no matter how you slice it, it's a great record. Uh, this is a new version. This is a reissue, the 180 gram version, so it's all heavy and big and nice. But let's talk about some of the weird things and interesting things that help add to its mystique. Of course, obviously, we got Chrissy, James, Martin, and Pete. Sadly, Pretenders 2 was the last album of the original Pretenders. I think a year after this was released, James would die suddenly, and a year or 8 months after that, Pete would be gone. So within a year and a half to 2 years of its release, original Pretenders were no more. So sadly, this is the last record of the original awesome Pretenders lineup. In fact, this record came out in 1981, I think August of 81. Like I said, I love this record. I was a teenager. I think I was 16 at the time in high school, bought it, loved it. A month later, thereabouts, the Pretenders came to town. My friend Paul Robertson had an extra ticket and he said, "Hey, Tim, you want to go see the Pretenders with me?" I freaked. I was like, "Yes, I would love to go see the Pretenders." I go home, I ask my dad. Dad says, "No way." I joked with my dad the rest of his life about that. Like, "Dad, I can forgive you for a lot of things, but I'll never forgive you for not letting me see the Pretenders." But anyway, I ended up get to see the Pretenders many times later on, but it was never the same because I didn't get to see the original Pretenders. But anyway, let's get back to the release. What's weird about this release? Well, I'll tell you one of the weird things. It was released in August of 81, got to number 10 in the US, I think number 7 in the UK. Not bad. So it was a top 10 album. What's weird though, everybody knows Chrissy was dating Ray Davies in the early 80s. They have a kid together. So there's your evidence right there. What's strange though, the day this was released, it was released the same day as the Kinks Give the People What They Want. Coincidental or not? I don't know. You tell me. Great record. One of the first things that hit me about this when I bought it when I was a teen was one of the very reasons why some of the critics slagged it off. Me personally, I liked the fact that it was varied, that it was very varied. I loved the first album. I didn't know what to expect. I guess I was expecting some more of that, just like the first album, more of that punky, rough edge sort of feel. And this has it, don't get me wrong, but when Chrissy got soft, the ballads, the kind of different style of songs, can you say that were on this album? That's what really caught my ear when I bought it. And I was like, wow, I like this. There's more scope, a wider scope to what the Pretenders are doing. And it's not just me who said that, by the way. Pete, when this album came out, he said that, well, actually, he thought it was a very good album. He was proud of this album. And one of the reasons why is because when the Pretenders put out their first album, they didn't expect it to blow up like it did on either side of the Atlantic. So immediately they were out having to play, go through Europe, play several tours in England, go to the United States, play. So it was go, 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 go. That made the band tighter, a more cohesive unit. And they were playing all the time. So they just got better and better and better. So by the time they came around to record this, Pete thought it was great, that this was really a band effort as opposed to the first one, because everybody was playing together and more in sync, or playing tighter and more in sync. Chrissy, on the other hand, when asked about this album, she thought it took a little too long to put out. because she's from the old school where you put out like 2 albums in a year and whatnot. So she actually said that she was a little embarrassed that she felt she was a member of Yes, that old hippie group, because they would take a long time to put an album out. But anyway, that's a few things about his little release. Sad thing, let's talk about that a second. Even though Pete liked this, and the album kind of, some people thought it was a hurried affair because, like I said, the Pretenders had been touring and it worked in their favor, like Pete said, because made for a good album. But while they were out touring, some of the guys got up to some crazy stuff. And sadly, that's why this would be the last album that the Pretenders would make, the original lineup would make, because when they were touring behind this album, remember, they did the first tour, went in the studio, and then basically turned right back around, go back out on the road again. Fame was getting to them, didn't have time off, just getting worn out. In fact, some of Chrissy's beefs with what was happening is on this record, you know. And we'll get to that in a minute. Pack It Up, Day After Day. We'll talk about those. Those were influenced by some things that happened on this tour and by touring. But while being on the road so much, Pete and James started playing with the heavy, dirty stuff, if you know what I mean, getting too into drugs. And they used to joke, I think it was James kind of made a joke on this tour, that he said Chrissy was actually, wouldn't touch anything harder than a glass of Merlot or Cab or something like that. Insider sources say Chrissy liked a little bit of that, you know what I mean? But anyway, sadly, the touring took its toll. And like I said, not long after this was released, was it 6 months? A year? About a year after this was released, not even quite a year, Pete was kicked out of the band because of his drug usage. And crazily enough, 2 days after Pete was kicked out, James died of a drug overdose. Heroin, yes. And then less than a year after James died, Pete died from a heroin, I think heroin, cocaine overdose. So sadly, yeah, both those guys, not long after this came out, within a year, it was all done. Everything changed. But let's get back to the album and talk about some weird things. One weird thing that was crazy to know, the band was only 3 years old when they made this. Incredible. And another weird thing, except for James, he was the kid of the group. Everybody else, when they recorded this album, was about 30 years old or had just turned 30. I think Martin or someone had turned 31 even. So it's crazy that everybody was 30 doing their second album, been together 3 years. I find that fascinating. Okay, me, I liked it. I like how varied it was and the different sounds on here. However, some of the critics thought it sounded too rushed, that Chrissy didn't have time to write like she wanted to. And she did admit, being on the road, she didn't really have a lot of time to write the way she wanted. But it didn't affect it in a bad way. However, the critics dogged it for one reason. After the major excess of the first album, while all the crazy fans are waiting for the second album, the Pretenders put out 2 singles in Europe. 2 standalone singles that weren't on the first album, and that was Talk of the Town and Message of Love. Now, that's all fine and good. The singles did good in Europe, and in fact, you know, Talk of the Town is considered one of the great Pretenders singles, a classic Pretenders single. In the US, on the other hand, the European market would buy 7 inches and stuff. The American market would buy more albums. They put those 2 singles out along with, I think, a couple live tracks. I think maybe Cuban Slide and Porcelain is on it. And it's called simply Pretenders Extended Play. You've seen it. It's a light blue thing, whatever. So anyway, the 2 singles stood alone in Europe. The EP comes out in America. And I don't know, a handful of months after that, everything's going fine. A few months after that, this comes out. Now, the critics got upset because those 2 singles that had been released previously were on this album. What does it matter? For me, I thought it was great. It just bolstered this and made it stronger. You know what I'm saying? So let's talk about the great songs that are on this record. You know, as a matter of fact, the New York Times at the time this came out said that Pretenders 2 would not be, get that, would not be mistaken for new wave like the first album, because this one was more solidly built and more tuneful than the first one, and that it was going to stand out more so than most of the records it would be compared with, their contemporaries in the album charts and whatever. And they're not wrong. And that's why I like it, because it is varied. Anyway, let's talk about the songs on here. Side 1, The Adulteress. What a way to start off. Boom! You get a double whammy, because coming up right after that, Bad Boys Get Spanked. Great track too. Message of Love. Great track. Like I said, that was one of the standalone singles, a classic Pretender single. Now, after that, the fourth song on side 1 is I Go to Sleep. This is another reason why the critics dogged this record, because the Pretenders had a Kinks song on the first album, and they have a Kinks song on this. This I Go to Sleep was another song written by Ray Davies. When I first heard it, listening to this record, 4 tracks into it when I'm 16 years old, I was blown away. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I didn't expect that, especially right after it came after Message of Love, which I loved. And then I heard I Go to Sleep. I was like, whoa. But anyway, it's okay that the Pretenders did that, because the Kinks never recorded that song. So why were they complaining? Then we move on to Birds of Paradise. To me, that was a 1, 2, 3 punch. I heard Message of Love, whoa. I Go to Sleep, whoa. And then Birds of Paradise knocked me out. I just fell in love with that when I heard all that. And then, of course, we have the classic Talk of the Town, which closes out side 1. A weird thing I noticed the other day, all 3 singles released from this album are all on side 1. How weird is that? Although they did release Louie Louie as a single, but I think it was only in one country. I don't know if it was released worldwide. And no, it's not a cover of Louie Louie. It's their own track, Louie Louie. Anyway, let's move on. I forgot to mention real quick on side 1, Message of Love was actually the first track written for this Pretenders 2 album. And what else is really cool about this, on side 1, one of the other singles, Talk of the Town, believe it or not, it's the first tune that the band actually wrote together in a studio. Because normally Chrissy comes in with a track, she plays it or whatever, they rehearse it, whatever. They know what they're doing before they get into the studio, so they all record it. But Talk of the Town was actually written, the very first Pretender song, actually written by everybody in the studio. So that's just another weird little tidbit. Let's get on to side 2, shall we? Pack It Up kicks off side 2, going pretty good. I think Chrissy said she wrote that when she had gone back on this tour. Well, would have been the first album tour, I guess. Was over there touring, and she was kind of disappointed with the way life had become in America. It was different than when she left it or whatever. Waste Not, Want Not. It's okay. It's an okay song. Day After Day. Another fantastic track. When I heard that, I was blown away. I was like, man, that is an awesome song. And again, that was inspired from touring, every day. Don't know what city I'm in. I don't even know if I'm in a relationship anymore. Everything's just flying by. So that was inspired by touring. Jealous Dogs, it's okay. Another one of my faves right here, y'all. English Roses. Awesome. What can you say about that song? That is awesome. And then, of course, like I said, that one oddball single that was released, Louie Louie, closes out side 2. I don't care what the critics said, because this 16-year-old kid, when I bought this album, I thought when Chrissy was singing soft and pretty, she was awesome. And when she was singing kind of dirty and raunchy, she was awesome. The Pretenders were just awesome. In fact, Zigzag magazine felt like I did. They said this new album was ran the gamut, 12 Pretenders classics, from all-out rockers or slashers, whatever it was they called it, put-down slashers or something like that, to romantic oozers. It has it all. And it did. And now in closing, let me just tell you, sadly, we missed Pete, and James died shortly after this came out. But it was weird, because Pete had said before he died, or before he was thrown out of the band, let me rephrase that. Before this album was even recorded, Pete had said that he had hoped to get back into the same studio with the same producer to record this, since they felt that, I think it was Manor Studios, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but they wanted to go back and record this new album there with Chris Thomas because they thought it was such a lucky charm and did so great the first time around, maybe it would work the second time around. It didn't start out that way. They were working with someone different, and they actually had gone to Paris to start working on the album, and that's where they wrote, what did I say, Message of Love, and started to work on a few tracks there. And then after several months, couple months there in Paris, the guy they were working with says, hey, my buddy Elton John called. I'm going to go work with him. You guys, you're on your own. But it worked in their favor. Why? Because the Pretenders went back to England, went back to Manor Studios where it all started, and got Chris Thomas back. Made the complete package. Awesome Pretenders 2. No sophomore slump here. It's just as great as the first album. And just a nice little thought that I liked about Pete. And he had said when this album had come out that this had it all. That he really thought, yes, it was a good band effort. The band was playing tight. The band was playing good. But he said he really liked the way the Pretenders were set up after this album. That he felt like they couldn't be pigeonholed. And he thought that was a good idea, because if you could be pigeonholed, they were going to stick a knife in your back. So he felt like the Pretenders were able to move and dodge bullets when it came to recording and how they presented themselves, especially with the array of songs on the first album and this album. And he thought that was a real trump card, a real ace card up his sleeve. And in fact, sadly, he said that after this was released, he hoped, because of that variety, that people would still be listening to the Pretenders albums 10 years from when this was released. That would have been 1991. It's 2025. Pretenders are still kicking ass. So, in the end, Pete had his dream come true. The Pretenders got back in the original studio, recorded a great album, and people still listen to Pretenders and revere them as one of the all-time greats. For me, definitely one of my favorite bands of all times. Pretenders 2, I loved it since I was 16 years old, and I still love it. How about you? What do you think of the Pretenders 2? Thanks for watching. Keep on rocking.